Welcome to Profiteers versus the People, the show where we punch up and dispel myths surrounding modern great people.
For the uninitiated, we take the very rich, particularly those with a media presence, like Elon Musk or Bill Gates or the Mowbrays, and put them through our PR torture test and see if they come out on crutches, which is our PR torture test acronym.
The C stands for consumer harm, the R for rich parents, U for union suppression and employee abuse, T for tax avoidance, often disguised as charity, the second C for child labor allegations, the H for harassment allegations, the E for egregious behavior after hours, and the S for slap suits and journalist suppression. I'm Money Mike.
And I'm Rad Bill. And so in this one, we're covering another heavy hitter, the feverishly competitive, deeply insecure, and as of today, second richest man in the entire world, Larry Ellison. On its face, Larry Ellison's story reads like that of the quintessential self-made American billionaire archetype. He was born in the Bronx, raised in Southside Chicago, went to med school and dropped out or something, and then bought a new Ford Thunderbird and drove from the slums of his upbringing to sunny California, where he secured a job coding and, relying on his ruthlessly competitive nature and his super genius mind powers, spun off with a handful of programmers to create a company that undergirds most of the modern internet today. His family today, back to modern times, makes movies and just recently began the long and arduous journey of assuming stewardship of SpongeBob SquarePants, South Park, and talk shows that dominate today's airwaves and ratings.
And all of this sounds like bullshit. It sounds scripted. It's too perfect.
Mm-hmm.
He falls into the archetype just too well. But how much of it is bullshit? And how much of it is sort of bullshit, and how much of it is real?
Frustratingly, it's hard to tell. In the past, when we've covered these astoundingly wealthy types, the big obstacle has been conspiracy theorists polluting the web with 10 million versions of the same, often anti-Semitic, lie. With Larry, there is a crackpot issue, but the crackpot is Larry fucking Ellison. The book, The Difference Between God and Larry Ellison, is an attempt at creating an impartial narrative around the man. But of course, the book starts by going straight to the deeply unfocused horse's mouth, kicking things off with the line, "Tell me about your childhood, Larry."
My childhood? See, that's the thing about Bill Clinton's attempt to fix healthcare.
This is not a far cry from what is actually written and what the exchange actually felt like, apparently. The author then tries to redirect Larry back to his childhood, and Larry veers off course again, talking about how the press portray him.
Wall Street Journal says I sign my checks in green because it's the color of money. That isn't why I sign my checks in green. I just like the color green.
Which is a funny reason. I almost think that that's a funnier reason to sign your checks in green.
Dude, if I got a check signed in green, I might give it back. I'd like, can you be a fucking adult and sign this in black or blue like you're over the age of 9? Like,
yeah.
Do you need a crayon? But another answer that he had was, this magazine, Upside, posted an article about the house I'm in right now, where I drove past with some babe at 2 a.m. and then woke up the owner and offered to buy the house with $4 million in cash I had in the trunk, and then went in with the babe and banged her. But I bought the house from a dead guy's estate.
And you hear this, and it's sneaky what he's doing here. Because when the book's author found the article that Larry was referencing, the Upside article, he discovered that the article just said that Larry Ellison still managed to buy the house later. After he woke the owner up in the middle of the night and offered him $4 million, which freaked the person out, he was ultimately able to get the owner to agree to selling the house a while down the road. Also, the sources, and this is crucial, were people who heard the story from Larry. This is how Larry's entire public persona has materialized and the way his childhood story has been disseminated in passing bludgeoned out of an accidentally combative and very easily distracted Larry Ellison, who wants to say whatever he thinks sounds the coolest. What winds up happening? The Tony Stark wannabe winds up sounding like Scar from The Lion King and looking like the God's not dead guy decided that God is actually dead, in fact. So, journalists do all this cat herding, and what do they get by way of an origin story? Well, they get something like this.
Larry Ellison was born in the Bronx to a 19-year-old Florence Spellman who put him up for adoption. He was then raised by his aunt and uncle Lewis and Lillis Ellison in a 2-room apartment in Southside Chicago. We all know the reputation of Southside Chicago. Gunfire, projects, tough town. The 2 toughest kids in his neighborhood were Cassius Clay and Sonny Liston. When he was 12, his adoptive father, who he describes as cold and distant, told him as an aside in one of their apparently pretty common fights that he was adopted. And this was the first that Larry had heard of this, and it apparently troubled him a great deal. No surprise there. It's like the ultimate backup insult. Well, you know what? You're fucking adopted. Honestly.
You know what? You don't have real parents. That is a one-hit KO there.
Yeah, the old Batman defense. But he was a smart kid. But where the other smart kids got good grades, Larry Ellison skipped class and got mixed grades and detention, of course. His biology teacher, Mrs. Coleman, who Larry remembers to this day, threatened to fail him for being so absent. Would you pass me if I got the highest grade on the final? Larry supposedly asked.
No, Miss Coleman supposedly said.
Because that's not how life works, you entitled piece of shit.
That's not how high school works, man. Yeah. I've got marks that I've got to keep. Are you shitting me?
What if I eat these 14 burgers at lunch? Larry, that doesn't matter.
This is biology. That would be fascinating, but we got to stick to the shit in the book, Larry.
So after graduation, Larry began his college career at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. Is it Urbana-Champaign? I don't know. I should have a friend who went there.
Really?
He left the university at the end of his sophomore year in the wake of his adoptive mother's passing. And that summer, he took his first trip to the Bay Area with a friend. And when he returned, he announced that he'd gotten into medical school. And throughout this period, Larry dated the same girl, a Miss Karen Rutsky. When he got into medical school, he asked that she leave the University of Michigan to support him in his venture into the medical profession. His whole family supposedly wanted him to be a doctor, so there was an obvious right and wrong here. However, Karen refused. And our sources are light on this, but it would seem that this paired with her refusal of a marriage proposal by Larry did the relationship in. And this decision would prove wise for Karen, however, because Larry ultimately refused to attend. Instead, he poured everything he had into buying a 1959 Ford Thunderbird and went out west. Larry then spent years learning how to program and bouncing between programming jobs. While at Amtex, an article was published about IBM's work for the CIA and the making of a relational database. After reading this article in 1977, Larry decided he could build this database before IBM with an initial investment by Larry of $1,200 and an additional $800 by his 2 business partners, which would create Oracle, which would be doing tens of millions of dollars in sales just 3 years later.
So, a lot to unpack there. Here are our gripes, and I'm going to start from the top.
Gripe 1. Did Larry grow up poor? Like, really poor?
Right? So, despite looking like a 50-year-old lizard, Larry Ellison is an 81-year-old human man. For 50-year-old lizard Larry, being born in the Bronx would have meant being born into a very different the Bronx than the one Larry the human man was born into. In the 70s, the Bronx was in crisis. White flight, funding shortages, and an out-of-control arson problem meant that the Bronx looked like a literal war zone. Gunfire echoes across the rubble-laden hellscape as human beings, snared by circumstance, did whatever it took to survive. This is how Larry describes 40s the Bronx. which around Larry's birth, was seeing German and Irish immigrants move to the suburbs and a Jewish population that was absolutely exploding. Are there funding shortages? Sure. However, this wasn't dictating the trajectory of the borough at this time by any stretch. Southside Chicago, where Larry was moved after adoption, has garnered a reputation similar to the Bronx, but in the 40s, again, it was a middle-class Jewish suburb. Upper middle-class Jewish suburb. Astonishingly, half the articles we found about this part of his life were like,
Larry Ellison was born in the mean streets of the Bronx in 1944, and then taken in by his aunt and uncle to live in a cramped apartment in the mean streets of Southside Chicago. It's like the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, except both where he came from and where he went were Bel-Air.
Right? I was sort of tickled by like more candid articles, and they were out there that were like, Larry grew up in the mean middle class, mostly Jewish streets of Southside Chicago. Further, while Cassius Clay was around Larry's age, he grew up in Louisville, Kentucky.
A place that no one wants to be ever.
Ever. Avoid if possible.
Yeah, no one has ever been like, hey, I'm going to Louisville, Kentucky, and I'm really thrilled about it.
Yeah, my wife's really excited about the wedding. She's even more excited about the bachelorette party, which will be taking place in Louisville, Kentucky. Sonny Liston was 12 years older than Larry and grew up in Arkansas. Now, though both men would live in Southside Chicago at some point in their lives, I can say with reasonable confidence that a 20-year-old Sonny Liston was not terrorizing Larry Ellison and his neighborhood pals when they were 8. Also, Lewis's daughter from a previous marriage lived right next door to Larry Ellison and his adoptive parents with her husband, who was a judge. I'm just not hearing the gunfire here, Larry. And tenement housing, which he mentions off and on, where on earth would tenement housing be? How on earth did Larry get away with spinning this yarn? This, paired with the part of Larry's story where he drops out of school and drives to California in a new convertible, tells me that although Larry's stepfather, Lewis Ellison, at one point was a successful real estate investor and lost a bunch of money in the Depression, maybe he didn't lose all of it, like the story suggests he might have. The difference between God and Larry Ellison goes some distance in confirming that the family in fact lived quite comfortably. This was a 2-bedroom apartment, not a 2-room apartment like a ton of our potential sources suggested. Further, Larry tells this whole story about dropping out of school and going on this road trip the way that a person who's always had some money might tell the story of going on that trip, where self-discovery is the focus rather than if you really did grow up in dire straits, you're flying into the abyss in hopes of finding something. It's a more desperate story than, I took this massive trip of discovery to Yosemite in this car that I just bought before disappearing out west.
It sounds like he was running towards something, not running away from something.
Yes,
It wasn't a trip of desperation, which is probably why he didn't sell the car.
Right.
Like
he's moving between cities with public transit. Like if you were desperate, dude, the car's the first thing going.
Yeah, people who are desperate don't buy Ford Thunderbirds. Also, when was this? Like, I keep forgetting how fucking old this guy is.
Right? Okay, so he is 22, which means this is 1966.
Damn.
Old guy.
His plastic surgeon makes him look plastic and dead, but when you realize that he's 1,000 years old, it just lowers the expectation bar a good bit.
It kind of has to. Like, after a while, a lot of that zest that I feel like brings a face alive, like, it starts to go away when you get older and keep getting corrective cosmetic surgeries to address it.
To put this into perspective, Larry Ellison is older than Donald Trump. He is older than Joe Biden. He's Rudy Giuliani's age.
Yeah.
So,
That's
I mean,
crazy.
that's the bar. That's the bar of what his peers look like.
Man, is that surgeon working overtime?
Yeah, honestly, that's money well spent. I gotta say,
I mean, you don't look exactly human, but to look, I mean,
he must have like a titanium staple somewhere in the back of his hair, just like holding all of that skin together.
It's just like a man bun, but of skin.
Oh God. Anyway,
to the end of like selling the car and the public transit and all that stuff, when you start looking, the story Larry regurgitates here and everywhere lacks any shred of respect for financial reality. I don't think I've ever encountered a self-made story so consistent in its retelling, yet so full of blatant and stupid holes. He gets away with telling this story for like 60 minutes and like huge reputable news sources. Quote unquote, in 1966, Larry spent every penny he had buying a teal 1959 Ford Thunderbird. Even a used version of this car was by no means cheap around this time. Larry Ellison is 22 in 1966. Again, the man is very old, but here he is young, back a jillion fucking years ago. A new 1966 Thunderbird would run you about $3,400 in 1966. That isn't cheap.
No.
A 1959 in 1966 is obviously going to be cheaper, and this is supposedly the model that Ellison was driving. With the estimates we found pegging the price at somewhere around a few grand, which we're going to take to mean $2,000. 19 grand in today's money.
Yeah, in the version of Southside Chicago that Larry has conjured, a person wouldn't be caught dead driving a car this nice.
Did he work up and scrounge every penny for the car? If Larry had done this to any meaningful degree, it would have been the title of his memoirs, The Poor Southside Chicago Kid and the Thunderbird. Because it isn't half of what he talks about, I'm inclined to believe he had help from mom and dad. To this end, we tried researching any existing family wealth, and my God, did we hit a lot of walls before realizing that it was ultimately a waste of time. Was there more money that we're being told about in Lewis Ellison's family? Well, the trail gets murky fast, and the things we thought we knew, even trivial factoids, get called into question very obviously all over the place. Despite every other story we read claiming that Lewis changed his name to Ellison when arriving in New York from Ukraine, or one of several other Eastern European nations, no one seems very sure on where he came from. His parents have the same last name, and so do all of his siblings. If there was a name change to Ellison, it was made by his parents. According to Larry, Lewis ran for office. No evidence of that taking place. One of our sources placed the birth rate of Lewis's mother, Larry Ellison's grandmother, as being between 1846 and 1886. Room enough for another person to come in, birth Lewis's mother, raise her practically, and then die. And then that person has Lewis's mom. His mother's side was a bit more suspicious on the existing wealth front. It appears Lillis Woolner Ellison's biological father was Joseph Gluck, a man who built a considerable textile fortune and died the year after Larry made his voyage out to Berkeley. Could he have lended the money to Larry? Maybe. In the end, while researching this question, we came to the conclusion that the question itself was deeply misguided. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm inclined to say we give Larry a little bit of slack here, and here's why. Number one, Larry doesn't brag about buying this car with his own money because in 1966, this just wasn't that impressive. In the 60s, minimum wage was different, and buying a nicer car wasn't that big of a deal if you were getting paid just minimum wage. People would work in fast food and save up for a convertible, and friends of their parents would see the car and shake their head and say things to themselves like, what a dumbass. But they were doing it. Larry was a lifeguard each summer. Though I'm sure his family could have given him the money, he could have put a hefty amount away in preparation for the acquisition of such a car and then taken out a loan for the car. This was common practice 60 years ago. The luxuries he did have here were two reputable parents from a neighborhood filled with judges, lawyers and business owners who could co-sign should the need arise. Even if they hadn't contributed actual money to the purchase, their names would have gone a long way. He is not the kid who grew up in the slums. Though with that being said, I'm sure his parents helped him plenty. The way this goes often is that the kid goes, hey, if you guys co-sign, I'll put money down and make the payments. And then mom and dad wind up making just a shitload of the payments, basically just paying for the car. We've heard the story before. The second reason, we're questioning the money and not the romantics of his purchasing a teal Thunderbird and then embarking on an out west voyage, a part of this story that is also deeply questionable. During his young adulthood, Larry did an extremely normal and predictable thing. His family was fine financially, but they were surrounded by people who were rich. Larry, embarrassed by his not being rich and desperate to conform to his buddies, worked a part-time job and was ultimately able to buy a used Sunbeam Alpine, which is a tiny little buzzy sports car. Still a considerable chunk of change that thing costs. Think back to that friend you had who bought a 2-year-old base-level Mustang at the age of 22 after getting a job that pays $22 an hour. That's sort of what we're talking here. It's irresponsible and arose from feeling shit about not being rich. When his friend was given a Corvette by his father, Larry, at this point a supposed college dropout, went and traded in his Sunbeam for a teal Ford Thunderbird. He didn't buy the car on a whim. This decision was completely disjointed from his ultimate decision to move to California.
Yeah, Larry's version of events here is just indicative of someone who, at the time, was self-conscious about their lack of means, and later became insecure about the privilege that they enjoyed, which, to be fair, just isn't that abnormal, right?
It's boring almost. It happens. That's a thing.
Yeah, like all of your friends get something nice and then you want something nice. And like you said, we all worked with somebody in our early 20s who had like a $50,000 car, and we were all thinking to ourselves, I know we make the same amount of money. So what the fuck are you doing?
How much debt did this kid go into?
Yeah.
That's not even a very nice car.
Yeah. And the answer is either they made a stupid financial decision at 22 and had a 4,000% interest rate on a car they couldn't afford, or they had a family member buy it for them. And really, neither of those two scenarios is indicative of anything other than a 22-year-old being 22. It's the zeitgeist and the almost unspoken aura that kind of surrounds it when Larry tells the story. Like you said, he doesn't explicitly connect the going out to California and buying this car as related activities, but the way that he tells them, it creates an air of inference around the event.
He would pass a lie detector test with it. I
yeah,
bought the car and then went out to California.
Yeah.
In sequence, that's true. But there's a lot more going on here.
Like most things, when you peer a little harder, it's just boring monotony.
It's just boring. And it's really, it is only funny because Larry told a different story or communicated a different story. Yeah. That's what makes this funny. Otherwise, it would be deeply unremarkable.
Right.
Yeah, this part of the story is such a thorough and completely unnecessary lie. Basically, in short, Larry's lying about the period leading into, during, and following his college career. Thanks to a loving and capable adoptive family when Larry wanted for something, though he sometimes had to put in a little more work than his buddies, he got it. His parents were perfectly comfortable financially, and their relationships, like the close one to the judge next door, almost certainly gave Larry a leg up and the confidence to make stupid, short-sighted decisions.
Yeah, and this dovetails pretty nicely into another one of Larry Ellison's claims that I am starting to get so fucking sick and tired of.
Oh my God, it's everywhere.
Like, if one more goddamn billionaire claims that they dropped out of undergrad even though they were accepted and ultimately decided not to go, I am going to have a fucking aneurysm.
It's
And
crazy.
it's so frustrating for a multitude of reasons. One of them being it's most times when we investigate further, it's bullshit in some way, shape, or form. But also because, especially among young men, college acceptance and graduation rates are fucking plummeting. Now, there's a lot of reasons why that's happening, and we could do a whole episode into the things that are wrong with the economy and higher education. But one of the reasons that I think that a lot of these young men in particular aren't going to school is because they have these false impressions in their heads of all of these financial role models who didn't go. And
Yeah.
as a result, they're not pursuing education. Now, you can get into an argument with me about the benefits of certain degree types and the expense of college, and I will agree with you on probably 80% of it. But when it boils down to it, I think that we can agree that a more educated population tends to be a better population. From an economic and social standpoint, the more skilled the labor force is and the smarter the population is, the higher the quality of life.
And the
And
lower the occurrences of TB.
yes,
We like that. TB
yes,
apparently sucks.
yeah, it's bad. And while Larry Ellison and Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk aren't the only reason that young men in particular aren't going to school, I don't think that I'm stepping out on too far of a limb here to say that those types of narratives are not encouraging people to go in the right direction.
All day. I agree with that.
To try to kind of drive the point home here that people with this level of platform lying about things, it has more of a butterfly effect than I think that them and their PR teams realize. And I really wish they were more responsible when they were spinning these PR narratives. Okay,
Right.
I'm off my soapbox. That was a little unrelated, but
Oh, come now. I
yes.
liked it.
Gripe number 2. Larry Ellison is a college dropout.
So, when news of Ellison's acceptance to and lack of interest in medical school proliferated the Ellison family, making its way next door to Larry's half-sister and her husband, the judge, people were pretty appalled. However, friends to whom Larry showed his acceptance letter had questions. The letter from the University of Southern California was short and typo-addled. It appeared that Larry Ellison had typed up an acceptance letter and addressed it to Larry Ellison for the USC Medical School.
Jesus, Larry. Did you write this?
When Larry showed the acceptance letter to Karen Rutsky, his then girlfriend, asking her to leave U of M and marry him, she broke up with him, and according to Larry, admitted to dating another man for 9 months up to that point. Larry and Karen, according to Larry, were on the same page in that moment about ending the 5-year relationship. But according to Karen, the real reason their relationship ended was that Larry Ellison lied about everything, and she was tired of litigating every single thing he said.
Which, if he's typing up fake acceptance letters for no reason other than a fake congratulations, I believe that.
I believe it too. Thank God she didn't drop out of U of M to take care of him while he went to quote-unquote medical school.
Yeah, what was his plan?
Dude, okay. Holy shit when we get full circle on that. So the only truly confrontational seeming source we could find was a 25-year-old article in the Tampa Bay Times where the writer, in collaboration with Richard Dreesen from the Washington Post, to whatever degree, went back and asked Larry how he felt about Karen Rutsky calling him a fucking liar. And Larry describes the notion that he lied to her as really quite breathtaking. Further stating that the fact that I stayed with Karen Rutsky for 5 years is one of the worst things anyone can say about me. The book, The Difference Between God and Larry Ellison, once again, our chief source for this, offers some more interesting insight on Ellison's college career. According to Ellison, his departure from undergrad his sophomore year was the result of his adoptive mother's passing. However, when the author called the school to verify, they were told that Larry's termination was the result of his inability to maintain a C average and his failure to take finals 2 semesters in a row. I'm sure his mother's death had a life-altering impact on Larry Ellison, but the fact that Larry missed exams the semester prior is telling. Quote, "My mother died, I was grieving," unquote, is an excuse that transcends reasonable critique. It's an excuse that not only warrants skipping exams, but also taking leave from your studies. It changes you. You're missing exams because your mother died, but that being a second strike on the whole skipping exams thing, that starts to challenge some of the he's too good for college stuff that Larry likes to put out. To that end, Larry is lucky he's been so successful. If the money hadn't come, this behavior, the just missing exams for no reason effectively this semester before and not getting anything that brings your average above a C, paired with his penchant for incredible tardiness and dishonesty, it could begin to paint him in the light of someone who is mentally ill, genuinely. Now, Larry's arrival to the Bay Area in the summer of 1966 was punctuated by the introduction to a recruiter named Ada Quinn, who he married about 6 months later, which is a bad idea. I'll go ahead and take a stand there. Wait longer before getting married. Even after they're getting married, Larry spent a lot of time talking about Karen Rutsky, which I'm sure was a tremendous strain on the relationship. However, he was apparently more evasive about his education, mentioning a school in Sheffield, England, that he finished his degree at the University of Illinois and was attending grad school at Berkeley.
You wouldn't know that school. It's in a different country.
Yeah.
I'm totally dating her. She goes to a different school.
Right, dude? The latter was a pretty enormous part of their marriage for the first few years. He was attending grad school at Berkeley. Larry would work nights so he could attend classes during the day and allegedly looked to Ada on a few occasions to pay for books before it was revealed that he was merely sitting in on classes and hadn't been enrolled at Berkeley since before they were married.
What the fuck, dude?
What is that? According to Ada, this was business as usual for Larry. A steady tide of massive, untenable lies. Though she ended the relationship before he made any real money, when asked, she maintains she's happy with the decision, and I feel like Larry's probably a lot. I've only heard of one other person maintaining lies that huge, and it was Casey fucking Anthony, who was like in the last podcast on the Left series. She did that, and I don't even know if it was 2 years. I think it was like 1 year maybe, or maybe it was 2 years. But she claimed to her parents, who she lived with, that she got a job at Universal Studios, and that was her 9 to 5. And between 9 and 5 in the afternoon, she would just disappear. Like go to a friend's house or fuck off or whatever. And then she would come back once she was quote unquote off work. Not a far cry from what Larry's doing here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, when the two were together, Larry bounced from job to job, often taking pay cuts along the way. Though the couple lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in Oakland and made $1,600 a month, Larry spent money spontaneously and extravagantly. After the two married, he got a nose job. Despite the tight budget, it does sound like this was justified. His nose was apparently a fucking nightmare of a nose. It broken up and busted from athletics, and maybe it never looked that good. But Larry's insistence that his nose job be done by a Beverly Hills plastic surgeon, probably more on the indulgent side. He took out a $3,000 loan to buy a sailboat while still making payments on a smaller sailboat. Purchased a $1,000 bicycle, this is in the 1970s, and paid top dollar for expensive lunches all over town. By 1974, poor Ada made it up in her mind that the relationship was doomed. Now, when reflecting on the matter years later, Ellison's version of the story is one of triumph over nonsense. We went to therapy together, or she said we should go to therapy. I asked about the process and got this long gibberish answer and was like, no, thank you. However, Ada's story is one of escape, and it frames Ellison as more desperate. The topic of money came up, and Ellison said that to quell her financial concerns, he'd just become a millionaire. She'd never heard him mention the idea before, and apparently didn't think too seriously about it here. Can't say I blame her. In her words, Larry kept her up for 3 days trying to convince her to stay. She wished him well, promised the two would remain friends, and offered to pay off the couple's remaining debts.
What a gal.
What a gal. Incredibly, she stuck to her word. A decision made on some vague principle of leaving things better than how they were found. For her troubles, years down the road, Larry would give her a Mercedes and pay off her parents' mortgage and give her husband a high-paying, low-intensity job while he battled cancer.
I mean, that just feels like paying back the interest.
Right, dude? Okay.
Dude.
Right?
like if I was pretending to work and spending money on like
Can you believe that?
No! I hate being a typical millennial and referencing The Office, but like, do you remember that Office episode where Oscar is giving Michael financial advice because he's got himself in a bunch of debt, and he's like, "All right, Michael, here are the three categories that you're spending your money on. One, we have essentials. These are things like your rent, your electricity, whatever. The second are things like pleasure items. And the third are things that no one should ever spend money on. And this is where all of your money is going." And I feel like Larry is like pulling everything into bucket 3 with no job. He's like, I'm pretending to work. I better get a nose job. Like this dude is like a sugar. He's an OnlyFans girl before OnlyFans girls existed. I can't imagine doing that. And then my wife being like, "All right, I'm going to leave you, but I'll accept your $12,000 of God stupid debt."
And this is huge debt at the time. Like, imagine he's like sitting with you at dinner and you've made dinner because fucking it's the 70s.
Yeah.
And he goes, between bites, just got another sailboat. It's like, Larry, it's 34 feet. It's longer than the other one. Larry, you're not even done paying off the other one.
with your $0 a month salary, Larry. What are you doing? So, okay, anyway. You get this.
Oh, God.
Gripe 3. And this is another gripe that if I have to read another one of these fucking stories with this implication, I'm gonna have an aneurysm.
Me too, babe. Me too.
There is this constant implication of a master plan. Like he was not flailing like a nervous wreck and making all of these stupid impulsive decisions. And behind it all, there was some puppet master idea.
Yeah, like he just decided, I'm going to get rich. And that was it. Like,
yeah.
If we're doing the cocktail math correctly here, the year that Larry's marriage to Ada concluded, 1973 or thereabout, 7 years after they had started their marriage, his position at Amdahl was terminated. Stuart Fagan worked across the hall from Larry Ellison and remembers the man never shutting the hell up. So when Amdahl began falling behind and had to look for places to trim fat, he felt the pink slip that landed on Ellison's desk was all but inevitable.
Ouch. That's what happens when you're the personality hire, I guess.
So things were going great. Stuart would occasionally grab lunch with Ellison, though he, like everyone else, made mention of Ellison's being between 30 and 90 minutes late for just about any planned gathering. He would eventually get a call from Larry about getting in on the ground floor of this new thing Larry was getting up to called Oracle, and he refused initially, which, who can blame him, probably cost the poor bastard a few $1 billion. But, like, what's the lesson here?
Yeah, like, don't write off the loud, dumb guy at work. With the information that he had at the time, He made the right call.
All day long. Like, what are you supposed to be naively accepting and just throw your money wherever some idiot at work tells you to throw it?
Yeah,
He got fired for a reason.
Yeah.
And Stuart Fagan was like, good. It means I'm working for something here, basically. Right. I hate it, but so long as this current system persists, maybe that's the key to success. If we're trying to derive a lesson from this, get out there and just lick boots speculatively. Next stop for Larry was Ampex. Ampex. Yeah. It was here that he was introduced to Ed Oates and Bob Miner, who described Ellison as loud and eager to discuss pressing matters of the day, like Larry Ellison. The way Larry tells it, he was assigned to a manager he thought was incompetent, so he worked under Bob Miner instead.
Now, like everything else, there's no way to prove this. The likely imagined senior management figure in this story is unnamed. It's very possible that he had a conversation with himself after management assigned him to work with a specific person by just saying, here's your desk. And Larry was like, nah, this guy's an idiot. I'll sit over here where the real genius work happens.
Now, the real genius work in Larry's mind was being done by Bob Miner, who we just mentioned. And with that being said, Bob wasn't exactly doing an ocean of this real genius work. He was susceptible to Larry's brand of being a massive fucking distraction. So he and Larry hit it off and filled their time with lunch breaks and games of chess. In the cracks, in between these, Bob's basically filling the cracks in his schedule of fucking around with Larry with code and coding. Pretty good coding, apparently. And though a manager of Larry's at the time said he was a capable coder, Larry was filling his cracks by talking about how rich he was on his way to becoming. Speaking of, the opportunity to get rich made its way to the three men by way of an article written by Ted Cobb of IBM. Now, Ted was an academic in a field that at the time was largely academic, meaning information was shared to ensure that an entire community could pool its brainpower to come up with the best possible solution. We'll go into more detail on how exactly the tech needed to work in the next episode, but here's the gist. The CIA was looking to contract with IBM to build a database tool that could correlate data fields. That doesn't mean anything to any of you, does it? But we'll break it down in the next episode. Bear with us here. Larry, or one of the three men, saw this article, and Larry decided that the three men could beat IBM in the race to make this product. To Larry's credit, in interviews, when he says he looked at the white paper and said to himself, I can do this, and told the other guys to leave Ampex with him to start Oracle, I believe him on this part. I think this part happened, and that Larry changed very little about this event while recounting the occurrence over the years. A spur-of-the-moment decision like this is perfectly in line with who Larry Ellison is as a person.
That decision requires just such a high level of impulsiveness and delusions of grandeur that I see no holes.
It is a decision on par in impulsiveness and recklessness with cutting your own hair. Both of them give me the same pause.
After watching one YouTube video about cutting your own hair, thinking, how hard could this be?
It's a spur-of-the-moment decision, perfectly in line with who he is as a person, and I would posit that this moment was the most valuable contribution Larry Ellison made to his own fortune. While farting around and not doing work, the not really poor, deeply dishonest, deeply unreliable Larry Ellison flipped through the right magazine and told the right coders to quit their jobs and come work for him at the company the three would name after the database they built for the CIA, Oracle. Thank you all so much for listening. Join us for the next one where we talk about Oracle's establishment and rise. It's a fascinating story, actually, with a lot of players, a lot of deeply irresponsible decisions, and a deeply unreliable narrator, that being, of course, Larry Ellison. Did you enjoy the episode? Consider giving us a rating on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify or one of the other ones, or liking this video on YouTube. We need more engagement there. We're not getting the bites I thought we would. Did we do just okay? Let us know in the comments. Say, hey guys, as far as podcast episodes go, this was just okay. If you have a second, please consider subscribing. It apparently makes a huge difference, though I'm not exactly sure how. Anyways, tune in next time. We love you. And goodbye.